some people with us now. We're going to ask some questions on the way. We've got some polls, and we're going to stop and pause for some of you have been typing in already. Type in your questions or any comments you want to make if you're on the webinar. People on Twitter will be tweeting away, hopefully, and we'll pause to allow Mariels to give us a flavour of what they're talking about. We've also got our punkettes, our team, our students who are also curating punk, for those of you that do tweet with punk. And thank you for Nathan, although he won't be necessarily able to hear me at the moment because he's going to be busy making sure that questions go out through punk as well. So it's a multi-platform, and this is the second time Kerry and I have done this using webinar and Twitter to talk about particular key things. So we're talking about giving feedback tonight, but first of all, if you just bear with me a second, I'm going to ask a poll and ask people where they're joining us from, and I'm going to launch that, and so you will have the poll come up on screen. Click the button that relates to you, and I'll just give you a minute or two.
And I've just learnt what PUNC stands for, which is P-U-N-C, and it's Plymouth University Nursing Cohort. There we go. So just in case you're wondering what we're talking about when you're talking about punk and the hashtag punk and punkettes, that's what it's for, Plymouth University Nursing Cohort.
Right, we're nearly there. And I'm probably going to...
Well, we're all in England, aren't we?
Yeah.
I'm up in Yorkshire.
I'm going to close the poll and share it. Getting good.
Wow.
Well, it's all the Celtic, it's all of England and a big chunk of Wales. No other yet. We do know that obviously on Twitter it'd be shame we can't tweet polls. Is all I can say.
Well, we can tweet polls, but it was a little bit tricky from different accounts and how to collate that information. But maybe we could try that next time.
Yeah, maybe we can
tweeting our polls.
Learn that skill.
Learn that.
Yeah.
Skill.
Well, we'll hone that. We'll hone that skill. I'm hoping that the Wales contingency are some of them are from Swansea, because I know Tessa Watts has been very kind and very supportive, tweeting out about this mentoring and giving effective feedback masterclass. So if you're from Swansea, hello.
I'm just going to ask you how you're all feeling, and then we'll get cracking on. Ooh.
I'm not sure what I think. Tired is tired, but we actually say that in our house anyway. Like, I'm really tired.
I was tired when that's the Cornish way of saying it. Tired.
We actually don't even say that. So when we're tired, we always go with tired.
Yeah, I was tired when I put that on. Ooh. So.
Well, I'm good. How are you, Mariel?
I'm doing okay. I'm just labouring over a tweet.
Well, the good thing is that we're either good or we're in between, and that's really good news. And
yeah, all the tired people are not come.
Good. I'm good.
Right, and then the last question, and then we're on. This is, and we want to know potentially why you've joined us, or what are you, if you know. That is, if you wanted to add, if you wanted to give us some more information, those of you that are other healthcare workers, we can only do 5 questions. So those of you that are other healthcare workers, if you wanted to type in, that would be really useful for us to know a little bit more about you.
Or if you're somebody completely outside of that, so like me, then again you can let us know what you are. So I am a study skills support tutor, although I do some lecturing and I do some consultancy on inclusivity and neurodiversity and supporting learners and students who have dyslexia and dyspraxia. So I do research, so I'm sort of an academic, but I don't relate to that, so I would be other and I'd have to type into the box. What are you, Mariel?
Shall I? I'm a nurse. No, I'm an academic. No, I'm a student. I am free. I
Muriel,
could answer all of those.
yeah, cancel those. So what's really interesting, thank you very much. We've got some students with us tonight, and I've done masterclasses on giving feedback before, and I've done this as a webinar before, but I've only ever done this with mentors and academics. So this is the first time we've got students with us. We know we're going to have students joining us on Twitter, and that is really brilliant. We have students with us. So we've got somebody who's an OT, piloting clinical practice facilitator role for OTs. Brilliant, well done. Thank you, Emma. That's useful to know. So let's, without further ado, move on to our next slide. So we're going to look at best practice in the art of giving feedback. We need to remind you about the professional code through social media for those people that are tweeting. We're on hashtag PUNC, punk, and any of those other ones that are there. Punk 14, KNAD, diverse learners, we're all there, but tonight it'd be best if you go through the hashtag punk, because Muriel can hopefully manage that.
And also, if you use the hashtag, then you can follow the conversation by putting the hashtag, if you're new to Twitter, hashtag in the search and in the search box on Twitter, and it will bring up everybody who's tweeting about things today under the hashtag.
Right, we move on. So also the other thing is consider reflecting on this evening and at the end, and you can use this for your CPD portfolio. For those of you that are nurses, it's for revalidation. Those of you that are students, again, it's really useful to reflect and consider the things that you've learned, what you take forward, and how it relates to practice. And it could fit into evidence that you might want to collect for your nursing assessments, because it would relate to professional values, communication, and also management and leadership. Even as students, you're going to be involved in teaching and coaching other students, and certainly when you're a professional registrant, you're going to be engaging in mentoring activities, and giving feedback and receiving feedback and making sense of feedbacks are key skills, which we'll explore. So the first thing about feedback, it's a professional requirement to support learners in the clinical environment, and we all know that because our professional codes, whether you're a healthcare professional or a nurse, a midwife, and giving information on performance of others helps people know where they are and how they can improve. And as mentors and coaches and also academics, we are expected to provide quality learning and development and support people in learning roles to ensure safe practice. And it gets a bit multi-layered and complex sometimes when you're thinking about that. And as students, you are exposed, and Muriel said she's a student as well, you are also being exposed to receiving feedback on your progress. And it's important for us not to lose sight of how feedback affects people, but also how you can take things on the chin if it's constructive, and we'll dig into this a little bit deeper. So this is a key thing here. So I've hinted at these things. So it's ensuring competence, proficiency, and fitness for the job and registration. This is why we give feedback to learners, and if people aren't achieving well, it's important to identify that early. And when I talk to mentors and teach mentors, that's the key thing that we have a lot of discussion about. It's no good waiting until right at the end when you're saying, well, you know, you're not very good, or you haven't done well, or you could improve here, and people will say, well, why didn't anybody tell me before? Why have you left it till now to tell me? And this is a curious thing that, you know, we've had experience of that, and people say nobody's ever told me I haven't done something particularly well, and now right at the end they're telling me I haven't done well. So you could say that's negative. It's constructive but a bit late. So you've got to be positive is good, but also negative is not a good word perhaps, and constructive could be better, or corrective or remedial. As I sometimes.
I mean, there is something that we tend to use in the pedagogy of supporting learners who have dyslexia and dyspraxia at higher education level, and we call it areas of improvement. Often because people who have a disability or have had a poor learning experience due to their dyslexia and maybe not had the best support in school or secondary school, are often very used to people showing them the negative and the things that they need to get and the things that they're not doing right. So areas of improvement doesn't necessarily mean you're not very good at them, it just means that they need to improve, rather than having this negative connotation and then also anxiety about it.
Indeed. Oh, thumbs up.
Good feedback.
Good feedback. So it's so easy to give, and that's really important, and students will tell us that people will give them formal feedback. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying at the end of the day, actually you've done quite well today, again, and not necessarily wait for certain key milestones in an assessment process to do that. But one of the big things that I find interesting, and I discuss with people a lot of time, is why do we struggle to give positive feedback? What's wrong with telling people you've done quite well? Isn't it easier to do that than telling people they haven't done so well?
So that would be a great question to put out on Twitter. You know, why do we struggle to give positive feedback? And again, if you want to feed into either via Twitter or via the chat box, positive feedback, I go out of my way to give positive feedback. There's a lot of evidence out there about the effect of dyspraxia and dyslexia and mental health issues on self-esteem, self-belief and self-confidence, and often that reinforcement of what the things you can't do negatively affects that. So I don't go overboard, you know, that's not going to help either, you know, praising everything. There's been an article recently in The Guardian about that, about why we're praising everything. But equally, what seems maybe a small thing for you, maybe a very big thing for the learner. So it's really important to kind of just pick up some things that are going well each day, even if it's just, you know, oh, it was great that you helped me with that, or it was great you directed this person, or you dealt with that family really well. They can be quite small things. And it makes a massive difference, especially to the learners that we support who just feel like sometimes they don't know where they are, and that then causes anxiety as well.
Right. So, are learners generally passive or submissive receivers? One of the things we're thinking about is feedback sandwich. That looks quite nice and healthy, Kerry. I had a burger on my last
Well, I don't call it the feedback sandwich. It's often called the shit sandwich, and I'm just going to put it out there because it is called that sometimes, where you have something good, and then you tell them something that needs to improve, or something bad, and then something good again. So that's the idea. If you don't know, you might not think of feedback sandwich. Basically, a lot of people know it is the shit sandwich. I'll probably get told off afterwards, but never mind.
Somebody shared that with me on one of my mentorship courses. Yes, shit sandwich. That, you know, you tell them they're bad, then you tell them what they've done well, and then you maybe move forward. So what I'm going to ask the question now, and again, it's I'm just laughing because I'm thinking Mary will tweet, who uses the shit sandwich? I'm going to ask people, okay, so how many people do use the feedback sandwich? And if you're a student, you might, you know, we know practitioners and mentors are asking students for feedback because it helps them with their CPD and their revalidation. And we also ask students to give feedback about a placement at the end of it as well. And you might think that you know, using the I can see this the others won't, so I'm going to close the poll now. This is quite interesting.
But also what's useful is that nice. So 63% of you say yes, you use the feedback sandwich, and the 38 of you say no. Well, we have got another version of giving feedback a bit later that we're going to talk about, and maybe some of you use that. I wonder, actually, Muriel, if you could maybe tweet out how many people have been in receipt of the sandwich and maybe how they felt about that, because we get a lot of again, particularly because I'm dealing with dyslexia and dyspraxia and mental health and students who have those conditions, often they almost don't hear the praise. They focus on the negative and they haven't heard the praise. And often, even with essays and assignments, sometimes the feedback is so important to look at in order to improve for your next assignment. And the first thing I ask learners is, have you looked at the feedback? And they go, oof. And then actually when we look at the feedback, I've actually color-coded it with them. So green is like really positive stuff, yellow is an action, and like maybe blue is sort of like something to work on. It actually informs them next time what to keep doing, areas that they're getting right and areas that they can then improve, and then they can go access study support or they can access their tutor in order to work on those areas. So it works in various different ways, feedback.
So the Clients and Veterinary, the article we suggested you read as background to this session, in their research they identified that the feedback sandwich doesn't always work particularly well, because if you start off with the good, say, well, you've done quite well here, they miss the students think, oh, I'm doing okay, and they miss the fact that there were things that aren't doing so well, and then of course you're finishing with a positive as well, and so they completely miss the critical you need to improve here, because of the way feedback sandwich is doing. It's about the way you receive information, and I think that was quite an interesting point to realise. So, you know, does the feedback sandwich work that well? Mariel, has anybody come back on and asked tweeting about feedback sandwich before we talk about a different way?
We haven't got any feedback on Twitter, but it's certainly something I've observed in students and amongst mentors and nurses, that they just don't hear the positives, or they find it difficult to accept that they're valid. So it's something that I think as a profession we need to work with.
I agree. So I'm going to now talk about Pendleton, Pendleton's feedback model, which is well known. And when I got this slide ready, he wrote about it in 1984, which you could say is a long time ago. So Pendleton's in medical education, and he used some thoughts around how people might actually understand feedback. There's quite a lot written about Pendleton. You will see it, papers citing it and written about it. So it's a good thing. Now, what this particular slide I've got here says about clarifying points and information of fact. But what I think is a key, and when I started looking at giving feedback, I was thinking, well, actually, I do this, but I didn't realise it was a model, and that's quite often the way you do things. If you ask the students, how are things, how do you think things have been going, or how do you think you did today, some learners will kind of feel maybe I didn't do so well. Some will say, well, I think I did pretty well. What makes this as an important thing is, how do you think you did today? If they think they did well and you think they didn't, you know you've got a problem here, and you've got it then informs you how you need to then gear areas. Well, actually, at the third point, add your observation. If they thought they didn't do so well, but you thought they did, well, that's a good thing, because you can then bring them up. But essentially, most of my experience, if you're asking somebody how they thought they did and they weren't doing very well, 99% of the time they know that and say, well, I'm glad you've picked up, you've identified that you didn't do well. Let's take this forward. So it's putting the focus and the locus of control with them. So then you know what went well, what didn't go well, and then you think about what could you do differently next time. So if we work together tomorrow, what could you do to do this differently? Or, you know, you've done pretty well here. At the end of the day, nobody's going to work perfectly. There's always going to be something that people can improve on, and that's for all of us, regardless. You know, and last time Kerry and I did a tweet with NurChat on can't remember what it was now, but actually doing it right in my head. We reflected on it together afterwards. What went well, what didn't go well, what could we do better next time? And that's that reflective cycle. But you can do that very quickly. So yes, recommendations. And then if you're doing this as a formative or a summative assessment, then the recommendations can go into an action plan.
Yeah, and this is why I'd like to say, you know, and although I, you know, lecture on undergrad and postgrad nursing courses in the mentorship program at and work with Medell at Plymouth, this is really an everyday task that I do in all the sessions. So when people are wondering what, when they send their nursing students or their OT students off for a support session, this is a lot of what we do. We start off the session by saying, okay, how are things going, what's working well, then I will then reiterate saying, well, that sounds like it's gone really well, and often I'll say, well, how do you think they can fix it? And the majority of the time, and I know Pauline Sumner's out there somewhere who's another tutor who supports nursing students, most of the time they will have a strategy in place, a bit like Adele said she had. You know, she was doing this but wasn't aware that she was doing it. And often they'll say, well, you know, I could possibly use this, and actually asking the correct questions, like what went well, how could it be different, why do you think that happened, who could help you, which technology might help you. Asking those questions often leads the learner to identify themselves the potential solutions to some of these issues that they might be having, and also offers the balance, particularly those who have so low self-esteem and low self-confidence, or perhaps have had poor placement experience before and have come in here with a little bit of trepidation. Adding your observations is really good. It's I particularly like this Pendleton's feedback model, and again, like Adele, I didn't know I was using it.
So I'm going to take you back a slide and just remind you of what we said here. Learners are generally the passive or submit. Ooh, hello, we've gone mad now. Sorry about that. Right. Sorry, folks.
Learners are generally the passive or submissive.
Yeah, learners are.
Anything that's interactive, and it's a proactive approach, and of course preparation. We talk about the importance of reflection and preparation, and if you use the Pendleton's feedback model, not only does the mentor have to prepare, but the learner has to prepare. So, you know, particularly for those halfway placement interviews. Have we got anything whilst we're sorting out the slideshow, Marielle? Have we got any interesting feedback?
That's really weird. Oh, hello. Right.
There we go.
So yeah, so what I'm saying, what I was trying to make sure I got trigger happy, is Pendleton's feedback model, the students aren't the passive receiver of feedback on that. That's the point I wanted to make. And so hopefully they won't miss the shit in the sandwich. They'll actually feel a bit more proactive in making decisions about where they need to go, and etc. So nobody's actually typing anything at the moment, but there is always a delay. So I'm going to move on. And we are at the point, what are people asking? So any questions, anything to say? And Mariel, is there anything going on Twitter that would be of use?
Oh, we can't hear you, Mariel. Have you muted your microphone?
I don't know.
Oh, sorry, muted.
No, that's good practice, so we don't hear you when you're typing.
When I'm creaking around in the chair. I'm just trying to sort of capture some of the things that you're saying, the top tips. I thought it was really interesting, this idea about the feedback not being a passive thing, not mentors always want to know what it is that they can do to support their students, and I think it really helps. It brings it back to the student that they own it, and they engage with it fully rather than just expecting to have something delivered. There are a few tweets going mad now. I think Nathan's on there fielding some of them at the moment, so I'll pop off and have a look and then come back.
Okay.
And I was having a look as well, and we've actually put some I've actually put some screenshots. So if you want to look at diverse learners as well as Punk 14 and Punk, I've actually put some camera shots of the slides, so therefore you can actually feedback on information underneath each slide as well.
I was just thinking as well and reflecting as my colleague Jan, who was going to try and join us, phoned me shortly before we started getting ready for tonight, and she was asking me what advice to give a mentor who had a student that was underperforming. And one of the things I could have thought about saying, and I will say if Jan's with us tonight, or if she's not, I'll tell her tomorrow, is how about suggesting using Pendleton, because that will help, because we were talking about, you know, how the student's going to feel being told that they're not doing very well and they're likely not to pass. But I won't go into great detail, but it's just reminding me that that might be a good way of starting the meeting off. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't end up as an onslaught then as well.
Indeed.
Of when a student's failing, it can, you know, it can become, well, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do the other, you're not doing that very well. And again, you know, if you've got a student who is, you know, healthcare courses are very demanding. If you've got a student who's got a number of issues, perhaps in academic life, and they're trying to juggle finances and family, that can sometimes be the last straw, and they think, well, I'm never going to pass, I'm not going to do this, and that's a retention issue then as well. So the way you give feedback is really important, and I think it's a much under-practiced art. I think when you wrote at the beginning of that, Adele, about it being an art, I absolutely do think it really is, and I think it would benefit perhaps when you feedback to your trusts or your teams that you all go back to, perhaps blocking out some time to practice this, to do some role play, to have some case studies, and then look at how you might do this. People are just expected to be able to do it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we do this on our mentorship preparation course. We use scenarios and people rehearse giving feedback. People don't like role play. We start them off by showing them the video and then sort of, right, now take over from what you've seen. So we give them a snippet and saying, you know, you can be the mentor and you can be the student, and practice that. And we've done this with students when we've been getting with students to practice giving feedback. And it was, for me, it was really interesting that they actually found that, my goodness, that was quite useful to do that. Yeah, we don't like role play, but it was quite useful to see how I can rehearse giving feedback. And it is one of the recommendations we do, if you have got to sit down with a student and give them a difficult feedback, is to rehearse it with a colleague. That's another way. And this thing here that we've got here about the dilemma of being nurturing and critical. So as healthcare professionals, we're healthcare professionals because we care, and we are, you know, caring and nurturing and helping people get well is our business. And there's this dilemma that you also have to be critical, give feedback, and you're in the assessment role as well, and there is this conflict. And the question is it stressful? Some people might like to comment on that. I think the answer probably is yes, to some extent. It is stressful. People will relate to us how difficult actually that could be, and it does make you question your abilities. And there's you'll see in the literature the kind of, was it me or was it them? Is it them? Sorry, is it me or is it them? It's like, is it, am I thinking right? Are they not doing so well? You know, so you're questioning your judgment and your abilities, and you know, it's well published and written about that people, you know, feel that there, you know, there may be retribution if they don't pass students, and one of the things we do is always support mentors to deal with these difficult situations. But how can feedback skills be improved?
We've got some tips for you coming up.
Are they? Oh, right. I'm also talking. I'm trying to look at some of the questions or what people are typing in, but I'll stop in a second and do that. So if Kerry talks about tips, I'll have a look at what people are writing.
Okay, so here they're coming through now. So what's the recipe for giving effective feedback? I mean, this, you know, the skills in which we're talking about now are fundamental skills to being a nurse, to supporting patients. You know, they're transferable. But building a good relationship needs to include at the outset the clear settings of boundaries and ground rules. Okay, so a lot of the students that we've supported who have had difficult placements is often because those aren't in place to start with, or it also is because that first session, that introduction session that you're meant to have within the first couple of days of starting your placement has been delayed for some reason or hasn't happened, and therefore that is the ideal time to set the boundaries and the ground rules of that. Being confident. So one of the ways in which you can, because it's glib thing to say, oh yeah, be more confident, you know, well, how? Well, preparation really helps, and we go on and we've got a slide later on about the preparation that really helps. But if you're really clear about what the boundaries are, what the ground rules are, what's been going well, what hasn't been going so well, you can then almost defend your corner or think, well, actually, I've got to tell them this difficult information. If I prepare and perhaps signpost some things that might help them, then again, I'm not just going, you need to do X, I'm saying you need to do X, and here are some things that will help you develop that, or how can we work together to develop that. So we had a student, for example, who was really struggling with testing urine, and she was getting very flustered about it and very upset about it, and she says, I keep getting it wrong and I keep getting the huff and the again, and she says that was not feedback, it was just like telling me I was getting it wrong and making me feel self-conscious about it. So she actually sat down and they agreed that actually she would do the whole ward and she would go and test every single one that day. And that meant she had to do it 12 times, and by the time she got to the 12th one she had it absolutely down because she received a little bit of feedback each time. So being articulate and clearly and constructive is very useful. Well, don't just say what's going wrong, but give them some pointers as to how to improve that. List of examples is excellent. So again, when you're feeding back, when you were talking to patient X, it was really great in the fact that you listened, or your documentation was very good for patient Y, or oh, I've had good feedback from somebody from the MDT meeting or from a healthcare worker that you've worked with. Listening is massively underrated. You know, often learners won't tell you something until you give them a big space in which to tell you. I have this, I have one up here, and it just says on there, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, no, stop talking.
Oh, stop talking.
And I put that down because it then gives me the visual clue, plus I talk a lot, but then it gives me the visual clue on to listen. And then regularly checking understanding. So again, rather than just talking at them, open questions, but encourage that reflection. I mean, that's what this is, the Pendleton's about, and it's also what we're expected to do as healthcare practitioners, is to reflect. So again, we can say, using those WH questions, you know, what do you think you could do better? Who did you think benefited from that? Which technology might you use to do that in the future? Why do you think that happened? And it might be just because of time resources or tiredness or being unclear with direction, and it might actually be something to do with your performance as a mentor that is the issue.
So I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that people have said which are quite interesting. So yes, if you've received good critical feedback, it helps you think about how you would want to give good constructive feedback. So, and you'll have people who said, well, I was on the receiving end of shit feedback, and it makes it it makes it difficult for somebody to give somebody feedback when they've had an uncomfortable experience themselves. Georgina said she thinks that people are embarrassed by receiving positive feedback, and giving positive feedback as well is perhaps difficult for people. And the need to make it genuine and sincere, rather than making people feel patronised. And I think that's
a really good observation.
Yeah.
And it's something that we get quite a lot. And my husband has taught me to say thank you. So I recently did a mentoring event for Plymouth with Adele, and I got some great feedback, and I'm like, oh, that was really nice. And I was really excited. I went to my husband, who says, well, this is a big change in you, because usually you're like, yes, but I spoke too quickly, or yes, but I did this. So now, and actually with my team at Diverse Learners, when I actually give them feedback from students or feedback from myself, and they kind of go, oh, I go, and you need to say thank you. So it's kind of a thing in Diverse Learners that we actually say thank you for the feedback now, because again, it makes you think about, it makes you acknowledge the feedback, and you're more likely to remember it as well.
So what do we give feedback on? And obviously whatever assessment needs to be done, and the performance and standard and the action plans, obviously those things are there. But also it's very important to give feedback on professional behaviour and attitude. And I'd like to say this is probably the most difficult thing that mentors have to tackle, or to try and think of how they would actually do that, which is interesting. And again, is that because you know, the stiff upper English, you know, the thing takes you back, like, you know, you feel it's embarrassing or patronising, and or different, or you know, how can I tell somebody that their behaviour attitude's not right? It's quite difficult. And when I've looked, the Kleins and Rat Theory will also say this, but I've explored this with mentors as well, is that it's quite often you find it difficult to think about giving feedback because you don't know how that person's going to respond to it. And I think with professional behaviour and attitude, that's a difficult one. You know, excuse me, I think you're out of order here. Now, people might think, oh my God, I don't understand how people are perceiving me, and quite often that's what you do. You say, I don't think you probably realise how people are perceiving you. But you know, patients patients might be uncomfortable with the way you're speaking to them, and it's not a very professional way, or your attitude, or you know, there's the other thing about, you know, what is being a professional is what is being professional in practice to the people that you work with, and also to the patients in your care. And this is something that obviously those of us that are involved in teaching students is one of the things that we spend quite a bit of time exploring. But even so, regardless of all that, it's still difficult. People still find it difficult to say, oi you. Maybe it's better if you did say, oi you, you're out of order. Because you've also got to think about how professionally you will tell them, oi, you're out of order. And that comes on,
absolutely.
You know, and if there's problems with interpersonal skills as well, it's all that kind of thing. And this is where Pendleton helps, you know. It's a difficult one saying, so how do you think your professional behaviour and attitude is?
And also this links back to the boundaries that we were talking about earlier. So if in that initial session, and I think you should repeat it in the interim review that you do and in the final review, you know, saying, you know, if you have this, this is the way in which you do it. This is how I, you know, this is how I would appreciate your feedback. I often talk to people who have dyslexia and dyspraxia and say, you know, you can take a more proactive role. You can say, actually, I've just not tuned you out, but you know, I'm really finding it difficult to follow you. Can you give me my feedback like this? Can you you know, can you feedback and actually write some notes at the same time, so then I can interact? Because a lot of people who have, well, all learners to a certain extent, are so busy trying to think, oh, I must do this, I must do that, and take notes and use their mind to remember the information, that often they don't then interact with you and have a dialogue because they're so busy trying to remember all the information. So that taking a break, that listening, thinking about culture, thinking about diversity and the diversity of needs, all follows into this.
Muriel, tell us what's happening on Twitter.
We're all furiously tweeting. It's relatively quiet in terms of the people who are listening to the webinar. I think we've got people listening to the webinar, but I'm finding it a challenge to tweet and listen in and watch what's going on the screen. So I guess that's what's happening with other people as well. So we've got some things which are worth bringing in, certainly about students themselves being able to give feedback to their mentors, which is something that, because of the power dynamic, can be a real challenge. So, how do we encourage students to be able to give feedback, and how do we, in a professional way, and one in which that they feel able to point out the negatives and the positives in terms of the placement as well as the mentor themselves. And perhaps that's something that the Pendleton model and some of the things that you've picked up on are really fundamental.
I had had somebody on the mentorship course. Yeah, I had somebody on the mentorship course who asked their student feedback. I really want you to tell me how I've done, and the student told them, very very constructive way, about the fact you're very short and sharp with me, and also because you're so knowledgeable, I find you intimidating. And they didn't see themselves that way. But do you know what? It really made them think, and it really made them think about how they approach their work, their mentoring with students in the future. And she really, moved on and changed the way in which she worked with, communicated with, and so, there is value in doing that. She said, well, I asked and I got what I asked for, but the student was very sensitive in the way, way in which she did it. He was sort of like, didn't give it any difficulty. But you kind of things, I mean, I also talk to students saying, you know, I don't think my mentor was very professional, my mentor was very unpleasant to me and all this sort of thing. And I feel that I feel very hard that I can't tell them this, because exactly what you said, Mariel, it's about that power and control. And what I always say to mentors, regardless of whatever you do and how nice you are and how you know, motivating you are always in that position of power, because the student does not want you to fail them, and they feel that they can't challenge you or tell you that perhaps you could change the way in which you mentor or give me or talk to me, because they're frightened that you say, well, that's it. You know, same thing. People don't know how people.
Yeah, a lot of our students say that as well. They often say, oh, well, I'll feedback afterwards. I'll feedback on the evaluation form afterwards. And again, it might be worth looking at how then Plymouth or Swansea or Hull or whoever then feed that back to the mentor, because what you tend to find is that that doesn't necessarily get fed back to the individual mentor. It might be about the placement generally, and it doesn't get, and therefore the behaviour doesn't change. So what do you think affects feedback? Okay, so I'm aware that the time is cracking on.
Yes.
So we've talked about some of these already, about it being destructive or discouraging, and we've talked about low self-esteem or alternatively overconfident. But the key one for me is the bottom one. So not being followed up. So we hear this an awful lot, and now we support students all over the UK, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 364 days a year, sorry, and we hear this all the time, is that we don't when we get feedback and it's not followed up, or I'm not quite sure what to do with it, because they haven't told me how to improve. They've told me be more confident or write clearer notes, but they're not actually directed or supported in doing that, and therefore the learner learns to ignore the feedback because it doesn't have any meaning. This links to, you know, SMART goals, and it also links to developing metacognition and thinking skills and critical analysis. And also, particularly with the students that we see, again, who have a disability, it becomes an evaluation of character rather than performance, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the slides to come. But just be aware in terms of equality and diversity, in terms of inclusion, that one of these things is quite challenging. So moving on here, this is that learners who have a disability often report that their mentors start looking for issues. So if the learner comes in and says, oh, I have dyspraxia or dyslexia, and therefore the mentor knows that either from the student themselves or from the placement education plan that some universities use, they start looking for spelling mistakes and they start looking for issues. And if you look for them, you'll find them. And it may be that you have a student who maybe has made 4 or 5 spelling mistakes and you've not really noticed them, or you've just had a casual conversation about them. But because you know the learner is dyslexic, all of a sudden there's an overzealous approach towards it. Also applying a different criteria. I mean, Adele and I have talked about this quite a lot, well, they're not meeting their needs, or they need to be doing this. Well, do you ask all of your other students to spell everything really correctly or be able to time manage really well? And often they don't, but they apply different criteria because they're either worried about giving too much support or too little support. And they judge too early as well. It's like, oh, they're not going to be any good, they're not going to achieve their goals. I mean, I've had students who have told me that they've been told that they are going to fail their placement and they've got 3 or 4 weeks to go. You know, we all learn at different rates, we all learn in different ways, and sometimes, particularly if you have dyslexia or dyspraxia, it takes a long time to overlearn tasks. Once you have it, you have a very strong base for that task or that process, but learning that task or process will take longer than other people. It doesn't mean you can't do it, it just makes you longer. And they over-focus on areas to improve, so you've got to get your documentation perfect. Well, if you're in the first year and you're on placement 3, you know, you've got a long time to improve your documentation. And also, it normally tends to be in an area that is a challenge for the person. And they don't allow enough time. So in university, people often have 25% extra time for exams. Yes, it's more difficult to apply in practice, but it can be done, and it can be written into a placement education plan that is then given to each placement. And therefore often that comes from a lack of confidence and a lack of knowledge. So this is why we're putting this in here now, in that what we're talking about is good processes for any learner and also any mentor, but particularly useful to have good, constructive, achievable feedback given at the key times throughout the placement, but also every day. So if you have a learner with a disability, you have to make sure that you understand your personal responsibilities as well as the trust requirements of the Equality Act 2010. So often your trust will have a policy that is based on the Equality Act and the guidance within that. If your trust says this should happen, so for example, if the person has dyslexia and requests a quiet room, and you do not, as a mentor, provide that quiet room in order for that person to write up those notes, if that learner was to take you to court because you haven't put your reasonable adjustments in place, it would be you that were personally responsible because your trust has said this is what we will do for a particular learner or this is what we will do for types of learners, and you haven't then done it, then you will personally be the responsible. So it's really important that you understand that, and that's equally applicable to universities. We have a lot of people talking about having notes in advance. The university has a policy on putting notes on advance. Therefore, if the tutor themselves doesn't put the notes on when they within 48 hours or 24 hours or whatever the guidance is from the university, then they are personally responsible for not fulfilling the Equality Act. That isn't to scare you, that's just to make you aware that disability isn't somebody else's problem, it's not going to be sorted out by somebody else. We all have our role to play. If there are reasonable adjustments such as extra time, a quiet place, less caseload, use of technology, use of phone, all of those are reasonable adjustments and more, but that's a different webinar. You have to find those out, so ask the learner. So again, having that induction meeting is really important. Again, at a halfway point you can say, is there anything that you need to be doing, and that gives an opportunity to tell them what you need. Ask the university, the placement development team, HR. It's not just about somebody else's job. Oh, it's because the university didn't tell me or the placement facilitator didn't tell me. Everybody has to know. And for example, some universities have a grid where they say these are the, they don't mention the disability at all. They say these are the reasonable adjustments that are needed, because you don't actually need the label to put the reasonable adjustments in place. You're a learner, so you know you have a responsibility to find out that information. So in order to help you do all this, these are our five top tips. We've got 5 more on the next stage, so I'll let Adele talk this so I can have a drink of water.
All right, okay. So when you're thinking about giving feedback, don't forget you have other team members and patients that you can get feedback from. And also, it's important for students to know that you are going to be collating feedback from other members of the team. You're not going to be working with the students or your learners all the time, and it's important that people can contribute to that. Think about with the reflecting and reflectional feedback, and think about, mind mapping, listing, or putting feedback into a table. For them to take away and refer to, so something written essentially. Think about when you're at your meeting about how notes will be taken, and then don't forget the list of solutions and suggestions and the copy for you. Some student assessment documentations have somewhere for this to be written, but it can be written and given to them. So you're backing up what you're saying with your written affirmation. And I think that's really important. What I tend to do now if I'm meeting with students, I tend to then email them after a meeting saying, thank you for meeting me, these are the key things that we've talked about. So that's again another aid memoir, and it just reinforces what you said, because you're not sure always how people take it in. One of the other things that I've learned is before you close it, and maybe you have something written, is to say, now let's just go back over what we've talked about and what we've agreed, and that will tell you whether they have an understanding of what you've actually said. And I think that's really important if you've broken bad news, as it were, or you've given them feedback and have told them about things that aren't so good, that they actually understand that. But also, what is our plan of action? Tell me what it is you're going to do, so that you can then pick that up. So that might be a mixture of Pendleton in the sandwich. Say, right, where are you going to do? What are you going to do tomorrow? How are you going to feel about this? How are you going to move forward? Have you got it in you to do it? So giving them that go for it. We want to help you. We want you to move on, and those sort of positives that you get there. People are twisting.
That's a double whammy, isn't it, Adele?
Hey?
Sorry, we'll come to you in a minute. That's a double whammy, isn't it? Because you're then modelling a good feedback strategy.
Yeah.
So therefore that student is learning from you a very positive way to give feedback that actually is very useful for patients, is very useful for their group work, is very useful for MDT, for handovers, all sorts of reasons why that modelling of that good feedback and documentation of it afterwards, following it up, following it through, is a way of actually taking a very sort of multifaceted approach.
So those
Marielle?
And so those of you on the webinar, if you wanted to type any comments in, please do, because we'll share those in a minute. We're beginning to start to come towards the end of our session.
And people have got the hang of using the hashtag, so we're starting to be able to see some tweets. There's some discussion about disability and the information about people's individual, their diverse learning needs. How do they discuss that? How is that transmitted to the mentor in placement? And and when is the best time to do that? At what point? Nathan's saying that he always divulges any issues right at the beginning of the placement, so that because he's very clear about his need. And Julia Terry's written there's information for mentors about reasonable adjustments, and students with disabilities needs to be in the mentor training, and talked about audits as well. And I think certainly from an academic perspective, it's difficult to keep track of what's happening with individual students and diverse learning needs, but we can apply some of the techniques that uniformly across good techniques are good irrespective of the specific need of the student. When it comes to some particular disabilities, I think the feelings that are coming through here are some concerns about disclosure or about stigmatizing. But as nurses, we need to be able to step away from that and reflect on behaving professionally and thinking about how the reasonable adjustment, how to make that work for that particular student. And that can take a bit of headspace when we're in the middle of our day-to-day work, but it's something that we need to do and the student can help us with.
One of my most recent experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of my most recent experiences is a student with dyslexia, and she went in, and the placement asked me to go and visit after about 3 weeks, because they were concerned that they felt every day when she came in for a new day, it was like she was starting the placement for the first time. And she had disclosed that she was dyslexic when she arrived, and through our discussion I said, did you share your learning strategies with your mentor? And she said, well, no, I haven't really. And I said, do you think it might have been a good idea to do so? And when she sort of shared some of the things, and I sort of shared some of the common things, that advice that I give, and she said, yes, I do that sort of thing, or I do this a bit different. And they said, well, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't you tell us before? And you're all like, oh. And I, quite this.
Yeah, and equally, why did the mentor not ask? Do you know what I mean? But you would ask, for example, a patient perhaps how they go to, how do they go to the loo, or how do they manage, their activities of daily living. I think it's actually probably, Marielle, a whole webinar in itself.
Yes.
And if we start talking about that now, we might go.
May, yes, we are going to do a webinar on that coming up.
Okay, so and again, this is a very inclusive approach. This will actually meet a lot of learners' needs who have a diverse need or have a disability, or English as a second language, for example. All of this is excellent tips for everybody. So plan how to manage a learner's emotional reaction effectively. If, again, as Adele was saying, if you think that maybe what you've got to say is going to, be very British and we're very terribly uncomfortable, plan, right, okay, if they cry, what am I going to do? If they get very angry, what am I going to do? These are things that you can proactively plan for and have a sort of like I always call it like an arsenal, a toolkit, if you like, that you can draw on. Massive thing, please, please, please find a quiet place and put a do not disturb sign up. I cannot emphasize this enough. It doesn't matter if the learner has a disability like deafness or dyslexia or mental health or concentration issues. If you don't find a quiet place, you're going to get distractions. You're not going to be able to concentrate. You're not going to be able to, you've also confidentiality issues as well there, and a do not disturb sign. We have those red bibs on saying, I'm doing the drugs round, don't talk to me. It's almost a bit like that. If you're going to be interrupted, or can you just help with this, or is where that it completely throws the trust and the confidentiality and the rapport out as well. Use examples to support points. We've talked about that previously. Building listening time. We've also talked about that previously. And here's one of the ones that are talking about support and people's questions about disability. Signpost to other support, your education team, your enabling and disability services, your dyslexia tutor. So, perhaps you're struggling with this time management. Well, have you a dyslexia tutor? Have you a mentor? Could you perhaps discuss that in your sessions on how you could maybe manage your time better? Reminders, phones, etc. YouTube's a brilliant place. It's really underrated. We have a diverse nurses we have a diverse learners channel, and on that we have a diverse nurses project where learners who have disabilities talk about their tips. They also talk about their experiences, and we've also got people like Teresa Chin and Roy Lilly on there talking about why dyslexia works for them as a healthcare practitioner. And I've got to give a shout out for the student quality ambassadors as well, who I was recently doing a welcome event for them at UCLan, and they're all getting trained up. They've had me to go and train them as well. So sources of support. So we're not asking much of you, are we?
Talking about time management, we've kind of been talking about these things already. As I say, we will be sending stuff out from this, so you can have a think about that. And you're learning too. We're all learning as mentors, and we are going to, I've jumped right across there in a hurry and missed a trick there, but we've got some further signposting for you. What we want to do is kind of say, plugging the bit for next time round, we're going to be talking about managing underperforming students on the 3rd of May. We'll be sending out the information again, just a quick plug for it. But it's been interesting. We've got 2 minutes if anybody's got any questions that they wanted to quickly type in and ask. Otherwise, I'm going to be winding us up. We've still got 3 minutes left.
Did we do the final poll, Adele?
And we've got one final poll coming soon. Yeah.
Also, I'll be on Twitter throughout the evening. So if you have a time to reflect and you want to ask a question, we'll leave that. The tweet chat will carry on. You can dive into it or directly tweet me a tweet. That's not even right. Send me a tweet. There you go. So it's at diverse learners. So diverse learners all being one word.
So
that's what I'm going to be doing. What are you going to be doing?
Oh, some people are going to work. Oh, not good.
I'll be on Punk.
You'll be on Punk, Mariel.
Mariel will be punking.
I'll be on Punk this evening. So if people want to tweet, join in the tweet chatter, or have a conversation or extend the information, I'd be happy to be there. And I think Nathan is on duty as well. So that's a student and an academic.
Also, if you want to email me, so there are some topics we've talked about that you may wish to discuss off social media. So it's Kerry at diverse hyphen, which is the middle dash learners.co.uk if you want to have a chat.
If I come back at the top, and we have our contact bits here. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to be the eating feet up TV and reading. Actually, have a bath. Kerry said she was going to wash her hair 2 minutes before we were due to start. I thought she was joking.
Well, actually, yeah, I'll probably be doing all three. I'll probably be in bed, working, watching TV, eating pasta.
Okay, it is now dead on 7 o'clock. I'm just going to have one quick, just last look to see if anybody's actually put in anything on the questions or not.
Yeah, and also if you could put the last slide up with the first slide up with all our contact details on.
I have. Oh, am I going back? I need to go back. Previous. This one. This one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people can take a photograph of it with their cameras if they like, and be able to get in contact with us.
For some reason or other, I've lost the chat page. Thank you very much for those people that have joined us. We're going to say goodbye. I will be putting the recording on YouTube tomorrow, emailing you all. I'll email you certificates as well, those of you that have been online with us. A few people are going to sign off now. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Muriel, and thank you so much, Kerry. Well, there it is. I found it.
Thank you.
And also, if you do use the slides or the recording, if you could just make sure that you credit us with it, that would be much appreciated.
Right, I'm going to say goodbye now.